The longer that I'm on YouTube, the more and more that I'm realizing that I am pretty easy to please. There are so many products constantly coming out from different brands all over the place. And the question I feel like has kind of morphed throughout the years that I've been on YouTube, whether or not I like a product, whether or not I hate a product, but more so if I think this product is worth it. With the constant increase in price of different brands and different products, I feel like this is a way more worthy question and more of something that I want to focus on versus if I like something and if I don't. That's exactly what I want to do for you guys. I want to share with you my experiences with the products, why I may or may not like them, and ultimately if I think it's going to be worth it for you. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, then welcome. My name is Kristina, and on my channel we talk all things beauty from my own experiences. And as I mentioned, today we're going to be doing an updated reviews video on a bunch of different products that I have been testing out within the last month or two, or just generally since these products have launched. I have a good amount of things here. I will have everything that I talk about in this video tagged in the description box down below, as well as tagged here within YouTube, so you can easily click that little shopping icon and it'll take you directly to the websites that I shop them through. First on the list, I want to talk about the Huda Beauty Easy Blur foundation. This one kind of made waves in the beauty community when it first launched. A lot of people were very, I love this and I hate this. It was very much either side of the spectrum here. And I can honestly say that I was kind of like floating somewhere in between for a very long time. And I think that I still kind of am. I have a full wear test and review video talking about my early experiences with this foundation. So you guys can check that out if you want to see all of that. This does feel quite thick and creamy. The more that I use this, the more that I felt that on the skin. I definitely feel like it could kind of veer on being a little bit more creamy and thick rather than very fluid on the skin. I think because of that, a little bit of this does go a very long way. There is a lot of pigmentation within this foundation, so you don't have to worry about going in with a little bit of product and not getting enough coverage. You're definitely going to get some coverage out of this. I kind of like this with no primer. I like going in with just my skincare routine. I have a pretty extensive morning skincare routine, and I finish it off, of course, with moisturizer and with some sunscreen. So those two together kind of act as my primer. I let that dry down for, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes up to an hour, just whenever I decide to put makeup on that day. And then I will go in with this foundation. I don't think that there really is a good answer to if you absolutely need or absolutely do not need primer with this one, because I've heard it both ways. It really is based on your skin. But for me, I think that I get the most consistent results with this when I don't use any sort of primer. And if anything, I will use some sort of pore filling primer just right here on the inner parts of my face, and everything else I'll kind of leave and let my powders and my finishing baking powders and stuff do their job in place of the primer. In terms of longevity, I actually feel like this lasts a pretty long time on my skin. I can go a full work day with this on and still feel pretty comfortable with it. I will say that's not without any sort of powder touch-ups. I do find that whenever I wear this, the best way that I feel wearing this is to do my powder touch-ups. This is not going to be an oil controlling foundation by any means, but you can definitely control the oils as long as you powder down your face if you have oily skin like I do. In terms of the different foundations that have been coming out recently, this is probably the one that I have not reached for as often as the other ones. A lot of that does have to do with the fact that the last couple of months I have been traveling a lot, so I've had to scale down all of the makeup that I've been traveling with, and this is just not one that I immediately threw into my travel bag, just because I felt like this one did not give me the most consistent results whenever I wore it. Now that I've been home, I have been playing with it a lot more, and I'm trying to figure out exactly where it fits into my routine. I do really enjoy this when I'm looking for the coverage, but I don't think that it's going to be something that if you need a foundation to reach for every single day, Personally, for me, that this is not the one for that. The Dior foundation stick, I also have a full review wear test video wearing this foundation. I have this in the shade 3N, and this is actually one of the foundations that I did travel with. I used this and I brought it with me on all of my trips after I had purchased this. I really enjoy the stick format of this. I think it's really travel friendly. You have less of a chance of this spilling, and it's just a lot easier to swipe onto the skin and apply that way. This one almost looks a little too neutral, like it kind of pulls a little green. I feel like the last couple of weeks my skin tone has changed quite a bit, and sometimes in some lighting I feel like it kind of starts to turn a little bit greenish neutral on me. Right here it does look quite warm, but when I actually blend it out and on my skin, I don't know, there's something about the shade. At first I felt like it matched me absolutely perfectly, and I still think that it looks really good on my skin, but I don't know, I think there's something about it that leans a little bit olive tone sometimes. I still feel like this is a very beautiful, almost satiny, velvety matte finish. It doesn't add any extra excessive hydration to the skin, but it doesn't suck the life out of your skin and make it super flat and matte. I think it gives a really good balance of both, and if I were to choose one or the other, I would say that this definitely leans a little bit more matte. With that being said, I do really like the velvety texture. I like how thin this applies because it allows you to control exactly how much of this product you want to apply. You kind of let that layer dry down, and then you can kind of like spot conceal in some areas that you feel like you need a little bit more coverage. So I like that in terms of the format again, and the way that it applies. It's really user friendly, and because of that, I feel like the user experience, it's very much no fuss type of thing. You could even essentially just apply this with your fingertips. I have done that plenty of times, which is kind of unheard of for me, especially when it comes to other formats like liquid products, like liquid foundations. I never go in with my fingers, but I've noticed with stick foundations, I can definitely get away with doing that, especially because it does deposit a thinner layer of product. I like reaching for this when I kind of want to start off a little bit more matte with my foundation. This does end up wearing really, really well on my skin. I find that my natural oils kind of seep through throughout the day, and it doesn't look excessive. It doesn't look like I'm a grease ball or anything like that. I will say that there have been times where I have gone in and refinished the face, like I've put some blotting powder on, but I haven't had to do that every single time I've worn this. So for me, this is quite reliable in terms of how long it wears. And I think that more often than not, this gives me such a flawless, beautiful finish. It's just every so often I'll look at it and be like, I'm looking a little bit too grayish green. In terms of if I think this is worth it, it's $52. You get 0.37 ounces in here. So it's way less than what you would get in like a bottle of foundation. So it's very expensive. If I'm being completely honest with myself, that hurt me. Whenever I purchased this, I kind of was dying inside a little bit, but you guys know Dior Beauty, they really deliver when it comes to the actual quality of their makeup. I would say that I wear this 3 out of 5 times that I'm wearing foundation. So for me, I've gotten my money's worth. Now, in terms of if I think this is worth it, it's very expensive at $52, and you get 0.37 ounces, which is way less than what you would get in your standard 1 ounce liquid foundation bottle. If we're talking price point, I want to say that it's not worth it. But if we're talking about the way that this feels, the formulation, the way that this delivers on the skin, I do think that it performs like a luxury makeup brand. If you don't plan on using this as your everyday foundation, if you don't plan on adding this in to your like makeup rotation, it may not be worth it. If you're just curious about it, but you have a lot of foundations that maybe are velvety matte that seem to last as long as how I've described this one, I don't think that it would be worth it to splurge on this unless you buy this on sale. I know that the Sephora sale is coming up, so I think it would be worth it to pick it up then if you're already curious about this. Personally, as someone that tests makeup out constantly, I am reaching for this more often, and I did recently add this to my everyday makeup vanity. I did a whole video like reorganizing that, and I added this in there because I have been traveling with this so often. So for me, it is worth it. For you, I think that it's important to just kind of reevaluate and see if this is something that you're missing in your collection. Another stick foundation that I kind of view as the counterpart to the Dior foundation stick is this one. This is the LYS foundation stick. I have this in TG1. Like the Dior stick, that one is kind of off in shade. This one is also a little bit off in shade, but in terms of it being a little bit too warm, like I said, my skin tone has changed a little bit. And for me, when I put this onto my face versus like on the back of my hand, it almost looks a little bit orangey sometimes. I'm able to sort of correct that with my concealers and my powders and stuff to where it looks normal on the skin, but I will say when I first swipe it onto the skin these days, I'm like, ooh, it's a little bit warm. I also have a review video and wear test on this foundation as well. This is definitely more on the hydrating stick side of things. I was a little bit afraid of this because when I first applied it, it was very much hydrating on the skin, but it sets down really well, and surprisingly it lasts on the skin probably as long as the Dior stick foundation lasts on my skin. Maybe a little bit less time because I do find that my oils kind of come through slightly faster with this one on, but I will say that it's something that I'm still able to control with the amount of baking and finishing powder and stuff that I use, as well as with like setting spray and stuff. This is going to be the foundation that I reach for when I want something, again, that is no fuss, but I want something that's a little bit more dewy, a little bit more like natural skin like finish. Sometimes with like my everyday makeup, I just want something that evens out my skin tone, makes everything look really like nice and dewy, and that's all I really need throughout the day, and this one definitely gives me exactly that. And I think the most surprising thing about this is the way that it just kind of flawlessly sets down with powder. You don't get any separating, you don't get any caking or anything, even though this is a little bit more on the hydrating side of things. This one is 0.25 ounces, so it's a little bit less product than that Dior stick, and this one is $25, which is more than half the price of the Dior stick. So for me, $25 I think is very, very fair, especially with foundations these days. I feel like they're just getting more and more expensive. The way that this looks on the skin, the way that it stays on the skin, and especially because they have a really nice shade range, I think this is most definitely worth it. Like the Dior foundation stick, I've traveled with this one every single time. It's so easy. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm on vacation, I have every intention to do like really beautiful, kind of extensive like makeup looks, and that doesn't end up happening. I end up having like 30 minutes to get ready, so I got to do a quick makeup look, and this was so great for those times when I was like rushing and I just wanted something that I knew would look really good. This was what I was reaching for in those moments. Some concealers that I want to talk about: the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin Concealer. This is not necessarily like one of the newest concealers out on the market, but it is still quite new, and I had recently purchased it this last, I think, month or so. So this one is in the shade number 8. I will say that there's not a perfect match for the shades that I saw whenever I went into the store and I was like swatching all of them. This just happened to be the one that was closest to my skin tone, but it's still not the perfect shade, you know? But other than that, when I'm thinking of the way that I've been using this, I really like this as sort of a brightening concealer. Like I'll go in under my eyes, a little bit here on the center of my face, just to brighten everything up, and I actually really enjoy the finish of this. It adds a little bit of mattifying properties without clinging to any of my skin. Like it still blends out really nicely, and it kind of like transitions into the skin really well. So if I have a dewy foundation and then I put this concealer on, it's still going to look like everything like works together, because again, it's not going to look like I have a super matte concealer under the eyes. I think it's really great in terms of the pigmentation. I think that it gives me just that extra brightening to cover up any under eye darkness that I may have, and it works so well with other concealers. Another concealer that caught me me off guard. This is the bareMinerals Bare Pro All Over Skin Perfecting Matte Concealer. This is marketed as a matte concealer, and I have this in the shade Medium 300 Neutral, and I also have Medium 300 Warm, but the neutral one is the one that I've been reaching for the most. This is a 7.5 milliliter or 0.25 fluid ounce bottle, a lot bigger than other concealers that I own. And just like the Danessa Myricks concealer, this one is way brighter than my skin tone, and it's more matte. So you can see right there, it is quite bright, but I love to put this under the eyes and just any areas that I want to brighten up. And it gives me such a beautiful effect. It has really, really good pigmentation. And I actually feel like this has slightly more coverage than the Danessa Myricks one in terms of like the pigmentation, but there's definitely a difference in terms of finish. The Danessa Myricks one I think is creamier and a little bit matte, while the bareMineral one is more liquidy and more matte. So you can kind of see the finish on the back of my hand here. This is bareMinerals, and then this is Danessa. You can see a little bit more like sheen coming off of the Danessa Myricks one. So if you like something more mattifying, I think that this is going to be a really good one for you. It has really great pigmentation, and I've just been reaching for this whenever I want to just brighten everything up. Next is something that I received in PR a couple of weeks ago. It is the Merit Great Skin Priming Moisturizer. This, I believe, is Merit's very first primer, and I think their first moisturizer, if I'm not mistaken. I really like the amount of hydration that this leaves on the skin. This almost feels like more of a thin consistency of something similar to like the Bobbi Brown Rich Priming Face Base, the Charlotte Tilbury moisturizer. This feels like a less creamy, thick version of that. Like this feels a lot more lightweight. So for someone like me who has more oily skin, I'm always looking for something that adds a little bit of hydration, but doesn't end up feeling greasy or thick on the skin, something that actually absorbs into my skin. And I find that this works great for those times. I mentioned recently that I've just started to kind of play around with the Merit complexion stick again. For me, before using it with this product, I felt like it was a little bit dry, but whenever I layer it with this priming moisturizer, it definitely glides on a lot better, and it gives me just the right amount of coverage to where it looks like I don't really have makeup on, but I do have makeup on, you know, like that is she, isn't she wearing makeup type of thing. I also feel like this makes my skin feel really soft. I've only ever used this in terms of like makeup prep. So I'll go in with my usual skincare routine, do my moisturizer, my primer, or sorry, my moisturizer and my sunscreen, let that dry down. And then whenever I'm ready to do my makeup, I will go in with this and treat it almost like a primer. So it gives me a little bit of added hydration, but again, it's not going to make my oils come out any faster. It doesn't feel like a thick, greasy layer on the skin. I really, really enjoy it. I don't know if this is going to be enough hydration if you have extremely dry skin, and going into the colder months, I'm not sure if this is going to kind of cut it for you. But personally for me, as someone with oily skin, I actually really love the balance of hydration this gives me. In terms of if I think that this is worth it, so if I were to go in and compare it to the same consistency moisturizers that I compared it to previously, so the Bobbi Brown Face Base for 1.7 ounces, it's $69, while this Merit Priming Moisturizer for 1.7 ounces essentially, so it's 1.69 ounces, it's $38. So already it's a better value in terms of that. And then let's see what the Charlotte Tilbury one is. Charlotte Tilbury Magic Cream, which I know is a lot of people's holy grails, for 1.7 ounces of that, it's $100. So if you're comparing it in terms of finding something that is similar, not necessarily dupes, but just something that kind of acts similarly, this is definitely worth it in terms of pricing and in terms of the actual formulation. I think it works just as well as those products. But as like a primer moisturizer, if this is going to be your only primer, I don't know. I sometimes feel like this pairs really well with other primers, so I couldn't say that this is going to be the only primer and like the only one that I would choose in a lineup. I do like it. I think that it's really good, but do I think that it's the only primer that you need? And in terms of that, is it worth it? Not really. I mean, you could probably use just a regular moisturizer, like a creamy moisturizer, and call it a day. Use the same moisturizer you use in your skincare routine to prep your skin. That, I'm sure, is perfectly fine. But for me, someone who usually uses more like gel consistency moisturizers within their skincare routine, having something a little bit creamier, a little bit richer to prime the skin has been very nice. And I think this one also falls into that category where I'm like, if you're going to buy it on sale. That will definitely make it worth it. But if you're debating between different primers because you're looking for something specific other than moisturizer, I would say go with a different primer that is fitting your needs, such as like pore filling or mattifying or gripping or something. This is just going to be more of your standard moisturizing primer. Next, we have the Pacifica Dreamlit Glow Under Eye Brightener. I tested this out on like a testing new fall makeup video, and this is interesting to me. It is marketed as an under eye brightener, and I think that this is a little bit more skincare than it is makeup. I like this in terms of moisturizing the under eyes. I think it does a really good job at that. I can't speak on how this will affect the under eyes on a longer period of time because I don't think I've been consistent enough using it, and I don't think enough time has passed for me to see any noticeable results from any skincare benefits out of this. But the way that this feels under the skin, it really does kind of just feel like a liquidy eye cream. It has that extra pearly finish to it, but it's very, very fine. And I appreciate that about this because I don't feel like it looks like you smeared some metallic eye cream or concealer under the eyes. You can see it kind of just melted right into the skin. But because of that, I almost feel like it doesn't really do much unless you put a lot of this product on the under eyes. I don't really think that you're going to see that much of a difference with this. But if you're going into this kind of thinking of like the Rare Beauty under eye brighteners, I wouldn't really look at it that way because there's really no pigment to this. It's just like a shimmery sheen cream, like eye cream type of thing. I haven't really reached for this that much. I can say that pretty definitively. I think that it's good, but I don't really think that you absolutely need it. If you already have a really good eye cream, maybe even a moisturizer that you find works well under your eyes, I think that you could probably pass on this. Next up, we have the Terra 28 GetSet Translucent Powder. I have this again in the translucent shade. And honestly, I'm still kind of figuring this one out. So you see this marketed as being a very versatile product, a very versatile powder. It says that you can set your under eyes, you can dust it all over your face, you can use it as a blotting powder. But honestly, I feel like this is better as a finishing powder, as more of a blotting powder. I've tried to set under my eyes with this one, and I find that it doesn't really have the setting power that I personally really enjoy. I still bake under my eyes. I find that it's the best way for me to get like the longest wear time of my concealer and under eye products. But I have noticed that once I bake my face with a separate like loose powder and then I swirl this in and I kind of like dust away that baking powder with this, I get a really nice, very flawless finish. I don't get any sort of flashback whenever I use this, and I may be using like flash photography. I think it works really well in terms of almost like a finishing powder, but I feel like it's a little bit more than a finishing powder. So I've used it in all sorts of ways, and I've used it to kind of like set the face down, and I think it's great for setting the face down, but I do find that I kind of have to go in and blot my face a little bit more often when I use this solely to set my face. I think that if you're not excessively oily, maybe you have normal skin or you have slightly oily, maybe combination skin, this would be a really good powder because it's not going to be the most mattifying type of powder, and your skin still looks pretty much like skin whenever you use this. I think of this in terms of like the Kosas baked powders. Those have a little bit less powder finish than these, and this is like one step up from that. So if you like the Kosas powders but you almost feel like you need a little bit something more from them when it comes to setting or just like oil control, I would recommend that you check this one out. These are not extremely expensive if we're comparing it to other pressed powders on the market currently. It's $28 and you get 0.35 ounces out of this. I am pretty much in a very serious, very committed relationship up with my Laura Mercier Ultra Blur Pressed powder. That has quickly become my holy grail powder. I don't feel like this is going to be replacing that powder anytime soon. I enjoy having this as something that I can chuck in my bag and take with me as touch-ups. But honestly, so far it hasn't been my favorite. I feel like it does what it needs to do, but it leaves something to be desired. Okay, another product that honestly I was kind of ready to write off after a couple of uses. I was kind of like, it doesn't do as much for me as I want it to do. And I still think that that's true. I don't think that this does what I wanted it to do. However, this is kind of growing on me. I got this with the intention of using this as a baking powder, but personally, it doesn't give me the strength that I want a baking powder to give me. I got this in the shade Neutral Peach, and I like the shade a lot. I think it's just a little bit light to where it doesn't look yellow or too pinky under my eyes or like on my face. I think that it actually suits my complexion really well as of right now. It's a very thin, very finely milled powder here. It feels very silky on the skin. And I wouldn't say that this is strong enough for me to be a baking powder. I've heard a lot of people say that they actually love it for baking, but I've kind of figured out for me, the best way that this fits into my makeup routine is actually as almost like a finishing powder and a dusting powder. So I'll go in with a separate powder again to bake my face, and then I will go in with a fluffy brush, go and swirl into this powder, and then I'll use it to get rid of all of the bake, and it sort of adds an extra veil of this powder. My skin looks super airbrushed after doing that, and everything kind of like transitions really well, kind of melts in together really nicely. I like the way that this works that way, and I also feel like this is a really good touch-up powder. So whenever I'm finishing my makeup, I'll go in with a big spritz of MAC Fix Plus, and then I will repowder the face, and then I'll go in with my setting spray. And when I go to repowder my face between those steps, sometimes I will go in with this on like a powder puff, and then I'll rub it on my hand, and then I'll pat it in, and that gives me such a flawless airbrush look. If you don't need a lot of powder to fight your oils throughout the day, I think that this would be a great option for you. But even if you do prefer something a little bit more powerful, I think that you can still use this the same way that I do and get a beautiful finish. I actually feel like this is pretty worth it. I like this, the way that it makes my skin look every time I wear it, and I take pictures or I just look at my face in the mirror and I kind of look at what's going on. I'm always like, wow, the skin looks very flawless. So I'm really enjoying this one. Not the same way that I thought I would, but I'm still really liking it in the way that I found it works the best for me. We're heading into eyeshadow territory here, and the first one I want to address is this one. This is the Natasha Denona I Need a Warm palette. This kind of took the internet by storm when it first came out a couple of weeks ago. And right off the bat, I'm gonna tell you guys, I didn't even get mine full price. So I can't say that I think it's worth it, because I was trying to figure out the best way to get a discount on this for myself. So do I think it's worth it? I think it's $69. Okay, let's go over my thoughts on this and my experience with it. So first of all, I really like this palette. In terms of it being a warm palette, it definitely is a warm palette. In terms of it being a really easy everyday type of neutral palette to reach for, if that's what you're into, I think it's great for that. I think that this is going to give you a lot of core colors that you can use as your crease colors, your outer lid colors, your shimmery shades. The mattes in here are super blendable, very buttery. The shimmers here are really nice and buttery as well. They really are everything that you expect from a Natasha Denona formulation. But there's something to be desired in this one as well. So for me, I think it might just be my preferences these days. I feel like with the shimmers here, I almost wish that we had like a more glittery option versus just a 1-to-1 ratio of pigment and shimmer. Sometimes I feel like this doesn't pop on the lids as much as I want it to. It could definitely be me, because I do think I'm very novice when it comes to eyeshadow, and I've seen so many people do such intricate, beautiful eyeshadow looks with this palette. But in terms of the way that I wear eyeshadow, I kind kind of reach more for the mattes in this palette, and then I go elsewhere for my shimmers. I just feel like I like something a little bit more glittery these days, something that pops a little bit more here. I think Homey is going to be the one that gives me the most like glittery pop of shimmer here, and even that I feel like I have to go in and top it with something. I think the formulas are super buttery and beautiful, but for me, with my preferences and kind of what I wanted it to be, I could have passed on this, if I'm being completely honest. I should have passed on it, but the hype got me. The hype always gets me with these Natasha Denona palettes. They're so good, but I have yet to find my one and only like one and done eyeshadow palette from Natasha Denona. So I'm still looking for her. Some stick eyeshadows that I want to cover. First off being the NARS Faded eyeshadow stick. This one is exclusive, I believe, to NARS website and Ulta Beauty. They do not have this one at Sephora, so if you're looking for it like I was, this is going to be in Ulta. And look at this color. This is such a beautiful plummy purple shade, and then when you blend it out, it kind of looks like a deep magenta. I don't know how to explain it. It's just gorgeous. They blend really, really beautiful. My favorite way to wear this eyeshadow stick is actually as a liner, like a winged liner. I like to just draw this on to the outer corner and I'll flick it out. You do kind of have to build it up to get the intensity to show off this color. Otherwise, it may look a little bit more dark, like black. But when you blend it out, it kind of like blends that color out and makes it look really beautiful. It makes the eyes pop so much. Oh my gosh. I originally got this because I saw someone use this all over their lids, and I do find that it's a little bit harder to blend this evenly on the eyelids versus just as a wing on your eyes. So I will say it takes a little bit of practice because these do dry down really, really fast, but if you get it just right, this will stay on all day. When I use this as a winged liner, it stays all day, all night. I think that this is worth it strictly because of the color of it. I have yet to find a stick eyeshadow that has this specific purple to it to where you can actually see it. I feel like this is more of a unique eyeshadow stick color. There's definitely eyeshadow powders that I've seen that are similar to this, but in terms of a stick, this is the only one that I have found that looks like a purple that actually makes my eyes pop. I think it's worth it. I think it's so good, but I don't plan on buying any more of the NARS eyeshadow sticks because this is the only color, honestly, that like really stood out to me. Next, we have the Laura Mercier Caviar sticks. They sent me a bunch of their Caviar sticks a couple months ago, and I've been slowly testing all of them out. And these two are my most reached for everyday type of one and done eyeshadow sticks. These are the shades Burnished Bronze and Sugar Frost. So I like using Burnished Bronze all over the lids, and again, as more of a one and done eyeshadow right here. It's kind of this bronzy copper tone. You can see a little bit of like that reddish copper in there. And then we have Sugar Frost, which I actually like using to top Burnished Bronze, and I like using it more on the inner portions of my eyes to make the eyes pop. This one I think is probably my favorite, Sugar Frost right here. I think it looks so beautiful. It's right in the middle of being a champagne and slightly gold, so it looks a little bit more seamless with my complexion. I'm not wearing it today. Actually, I am wearing a little bit of it today, but I have it mixed with another one of the Laura Mercier Caviar sticks. I like the new formulation of these. Before this, I felt like they kind of skipped a little bit. They didn't really give me the intensity that I wanted them to. And these actually, if you draw them onto your eyes, like get a good layer, and then you let them set for 5, maybe 10, 15 seconds, and then you blend them out, I find that's the best way to preserve the pigmentation without blending it out completely into nothing. I found that before that's kind of the case with these Caviar sticks, but now that they've reformulated them, I feel like the pigmentation definitely lasts a lot longer. I really, really like these Caviar sticks. I think they're so good as one and done eyeshadows. Okay, Kulfi's Sona. This one is the Zari Eye eyeshadow. It's like their cream eyeshadows. And this I think is more marketed as being an eyeshadow topper, which makes makes sense. So this is going to be their like really nice and moussey eyeshadow formula. This is one of my absolute favorite eyeshadow formulas because of that moussey texture, and it completely dries down so you don't have to worry about these moving around on your eyelids throughout the day. And this color is just incredible. It's beautiful. Like, look at that glitter, look at that shimmer. It is gorgeous. You could probably wear this alone without any sort of base, but do you see how that just shines? And it, oh gosh, it looks insanely beautiful on the eyes. If we're talking products from Sephora, not like indie eyeshadows, this is the best of the best. Like, this looks incredible. It looks wet. I think this is so worth it, you guys. I knew I would love this too. Whenever they first announced it, I was like, oh, that is exactly what I want and what I need, and I was right. I use it so often. I will top any eye makeup look with it if I'm wanting a little bit more, like I said, glitter and sparkle and stuff, and I'm like, this eyeshadow is just not doing it for me. I will use a little bit of this Kulfi Sona, and it just gives me the exact look that I want, and it's the best. It's so good. You need the littlest, tiniest amount to completely cover your eyes. This is gonna last you such a long time. I am so in love with these Kulfi eyeshadows. They're just the best. The only lip product that I wanna update you guys on is this one, the Ulta Beauty Weightless Water Plum Paradise Stain. And this is incredible. I feel like more people need to know about this. It's exactly what you expect when you get a Benefit Benetint. However, I feel like this applies so much more evenly on the lips. It's not as drying either. You can see here, even with just the swatch on the back of my hand, just how pigmented and even that coverage is. I find that I can use this and just swipe it straight from the doe foot and get this exact pigmentation, and it stains right away. And I actually showed some of my girlfriends when we were on a trip. We were on a bachelorette, and I was like, you guys, look at this stain. It looks scary, right? And then I put it on, and it looks like the most natural lip stain. Like, it almost looks like it could be your lip color. It is incredible. I love it. It just kind of deepens up my lips a little bit. Almost looks like this, but not glossy. My favorite way to use this is actually as a base for my other lip products. So I will go in bare lips, swipe a little bit of this on so I have this on my lips, and then I'll go in with lip liner or lip gloss or whatever that I decide to use that day. And it kind of gives a little extra something, a little bit more depth to my lip color because I don't have very pigmented lips. I've lost a lot of the pigmentation in my lips throughout the years. So this kind of like brings it back, and oh, it's so good. I want to say that it's slightly hydrating, but it's not even that. It's just not drying the same way that the Benetints can be, or just liquid tints like these can feel. Even Asian lip tints, sometimes I feel like if they're not like the glossy lip stains, they can be a little bit drying, but this does not dry my lips out. This feels really nice. It just feels like I have nothing on my lips, and it lasts a very long time. I wouldn't say it's the longest lasting lip stain that I've used, but I would say that it lasts on my lips at least 3 to 4 hours if I'm not wearing anything else on my lips. So it lasts pretty well, and I really, really, really enjoy this, and I think it's only $10. So so good. Or maybe it's like $12, but you can use the Ulta coupons on Ulta Beauty Collection. So very much worth it. I have the other one, the orange one, which I think is nice, but personally, if you're going to choose one, highly recommend this one. The Fenty Beauty Fenty Cheeks in the shade Bacon Cakes. You guys know in the shop with me where I picked this one up, I had no intention of picking up the Fenty Beauty powders because I was like, if there's any that I would like, it would probably be this shade. But when I actually felt them in stores, this is so buttery and soft and smooth. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is going to be gorgeous on the skin. And I was absolutely correct about that. This has become very quickly one of my favorite blushes. It's buttery. It blends evenly on the skin. It gives the perfect amount of pigmentation. This shade right here is the most beautiful nude beige shade on my skin. It gives me that slight like flush of color, but it's not too much. It's so buildable, but I will say a little bit does go a long way. So what I like to do, I'll swirl my brush in there, tap the excess off, and then I'll go in to my cheeks and apply it, and then that usually will give me a really good base of blush. And if I have to go in with more, then I'll kind of like build it that way. But typically I can get the perfect amount of pigment just off of that one, and it just, oh, you guys, it looks airbrushed. It's so soft on the skin and it lasts forever on the face. I just love this. Oh, so much. This and the House Labs Fire Moon blush, these two are like almost on the same level in my head when it comes to like holy grail. This is quickly hitting holy grail status for me, or at least one of the best blushes to come out this year. The L'Oreal Le Lumi liquid blush in the shade 601 Dewy Worth It. I really like this blush. I think that this is such a good liquid blush, and this actually really reminds me of the Say Dew blush in the shade Rosy. So they're not exact dupes. I will say that they definitely look a little bit different, but applied on the skin, they give me that same sort of light pinky flush that just wakes up the skin without it being too in your face, you know? So here is Rosy on this side, and then we have the Dewy Worth It from L'Oreal on this side. You can see that this is definitely going to be a little bit more peach, the L'Oreal one, while the Say Dew blush is going to pull slightly more pink. So we can both say that looks different, but when it's applied onto the cheeks, I will say that the effect is so similar. Like I said, it just kind of like brightens up the skin. It gives you this really beautiful flush on the skin. The formulas of these just feel so similar. They're lightweight and thin, but if you actually get in there and feel them, they're very creamy. The pigmentation does not disappear as you blend these. As you can see, I'm blending and I'm blending, and you can still see that pigmentation from side to side is still very even. Same thing applies when you put this on the cheeks. They both have such great staying power. I love to use this as a base for any powder products. They work so well on the cheeks because they don't move my foundation and concealer around when I apply them. So I personally think that the L'Oreal liquid blushes are such a hit. I feel like more people need to be talking about these because they're so worth it. And again, you can probably find these on sale more often than not than like the Say Dew blushes. So if you're already a fan of these, check these out. I do like that these slightly dry down, but they're not going to completely dry down to a matte finish. They still look hydrating, but they do set really nicely under powder, and it works really well on top of it. Two perfumes that I want to cover with you guys. These are very new. So we have Glossier Doux and Glossier Reve. Now these are very different, but they at the core are very similar to Glossier U. They describe these as extensions of the Glossier U collection, and I actually feel like that's a really good description. So let's start off with Glossier U Doux. Both of them actually are $78, and this one is described as being woody and earthy. The keynotes are Sweet Violet, Palo Santo, and Ambrox. I would say that this is going to be the one that most people will reach for if they like more of a clean scent. I would say this one smells the most similar to Glossier U, the original version, but it's not as spicy. It does have a little bit more of a fresh, light scent to it. It almost smells a little bit floral as well, but it's definitely more of a clean, light scent. I feel like I smell a lot of the Palo Santo in here. And this is actually the one that I thought was going to be my absolute favorite. I was ready to just purchase this one, but we actually received these at the YouTube summit that I went to in October. So I got very lucky in that sense. So talking now about Glossier U Reve, this is actually my favorite. So again, you smell a lot of that like musk, like that U fragrance thing where it smells a little peppery, but this says it's a warm and spicy sweet gourmand scent. It has buttercream, plum butter, and ambrox. So both of them have that ambrox in them. And while this says it's a gourmand, and I was like, I don't like gourmands, the way that this sits on the skin with the mixture of the ambrox, with the peppery scent to it, the little spiciness of it, I think it settles down into the skin really nicely, so it smells slightly sweet without being overpowering. Like, it gives me that little note of buttercream without it being straight up like cake on the skin, and I love that. These are both so good. I don't think you can go wrong with them. I will say that this one, if I spray too much all over the skin, it kind of starts giving me a little bit of a headache because it's giving me a little bit more powdery, a little bit like more mature than what I'm going for. But this one, I am obsessed with this one. I let some of my girlfriends use this on the trip that we went on together, and they were in love with them as well. I think that these are really worth it too. At $78, I feel like fragrances currently are just getting more and more expensive, but you get 1.7 fluid ounces in both of these, and it's $78. My recommendation would be Reve, even if you're not a gourmand girl. I'm not a gourmand girl and I love it. But I will say, go into the stores, smell them, spray them on your skin because they do end up smelling very different on your skin, and see what you think. But I love them and I think they're definitely worth picking up during the sale. Lastly, we have a setting spray. This is the Milk Makeup Pore Eclipse Matte Setting Spray. They did send this to me in a big PR box a couple months ago, and this is heavy duty. In terms of being more of a liquid setting spray versus a finishing spray like the One Size one, this one does have a really, oh, I shouldn't have done that right in front of my face. This one does have a really fine mister, but I will say it can get a little bit clogged here on the nozzle. So every time I go in to use it, I kind of like scratch at the nozzle just to make sure that there's nothing dry, and then I'll do a test spray, and then I'll spray it all over my face. This is an incredibly long-lasting setting spray, and it makes my makeup stay all day. I will say this feels very tight on the skin for the first like 10-15 minutes, and then it kind of goes away. This is going to be one of those setting sprays that you can actually feel. I feel like it makes my makeup last for so long. Sometimes I'll even use this without my One Size Until Dawn setting spray, which says a lot because I use that every time I do my makeup. If you want something that's going to kind of like melt your makeup in but set it at the same time, this would be a really great option for that. All right guys, those were all of my updated reviews on a lot of the new products that I touched in recent videos. I will link those videos in the description box down below so you guys can check them out and see what my first impressions, first thoughts were on these same products. But I hope that you guys enjoy this. Let me know if you have any similar thoughts about these products as I do, and also let me know if you think completely differently. Like if you're like, well, Kristina, that's not my experience. I would love to know, and I'm sure everyone else would love to know your experience down below in the comments. But otherwise, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please make sure to comment, like, and subscribe for more videos like this one, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!